Episode 2, Key Issue. Here we are again, and again opening with more different hand gestures. I'm Randall Lobb.
I'm Isaac Elliott Fisher.
And we're here to talk about comic books, artists, writers, and values, thanks to our friends at Covrprice.com, Covrprice.com. Isaac, a recent convert to Covrprice. I think what you're going to do is you're going to be on it. We're both on it, but you're going to be hitting it hard today as we talk about something that we both know a little bit about, Conan the Barbarian. And I think really the supposition of this episode, let's talk about some of the things we're going to hit. We're going to talk about some of the key issues, some of the reasons why some of those issues are key, and some of the artists, in particular the artists, that we think have added something to that. And for those of you like Isaac who said, what about the Dark Horse? We're going to talk less about Dark Horse. Today we're going to go all the way back to old school Conan, make some references to the 2019 Marvel, but we're looking at Marvel Conan, because for most people who fell into Conan the Barbarian, it was 1970s Conan #1, Marvel Comics that woke them up. Now, Isaac, what is it about us that makes us qualified? Again, we had to do it last time. Why are we qualified to talk about this?
I'm going to go with my, should I do my osmosis quote again?
No, you can't use the same quote. I can't use the same quote. But truly, we're in a good place to talk about Conan, aren't we?
Yeah. Conan is another one of our properties that we have spent some significant time with.
Not one of our properties.
Not one of ours. Sorry, I mean one of the properties that we've spent a significant amount of time with. Because we are, I've been talking about this documentary for, 5 years, maybe more, that we're doing this documentary on Conan. It's a bit of a sore spot that it's not out yet.
There's a definitive it's not sore, let's not be bitter. There is a documentary about the history of the Conan franchise. It's a definitive documentary, A Riddle of Steel, the definitive history of Conan the Barbarian. And for a number of reasons, that documentary is trapped. How much would you say of production is completed?
I would say shooting production, I would say closer to 90%.
Really?
Yeah, but I know that you're a slightly lower number.
I say 80.
Yeah, I guess you know what? It's a sliding scale, because when the last we were shooting, I think we were closer to 90%. Mm-hmm. But then, more stuff happens. And that's actually exciting, because there's actually a lot of new cool stuff in Conan, specifically in the comics world with Marvel's Conan.
Isaac, that's why we need to look at Conan, because a lot of people have forgotten Conan, and a lot of people sleep on some of the collectible Conan titles.
Well, let's for 2 seconds here. There's a reason that there's many reasons that I think Conan is an underappreciated franchise in general, is because not only have people forgotten Conan from the comics, with the 70s stuff, which was Marvel's most successful title at the time. Mm-hmm. But they also, when they think of Conan, they just think of Arnold. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, sure, if the movie brings a lot of people to the franchise, that's great. And it's a fun movie, and it's one of my favorite sword and sorcery movies, really. But I think our goal, and it's a side thing here, but our goal with the documentary is to bring a lot of life and love to Robert E. Howard, because, he's a real hero here.
He's the real hero.
He's the real hero.
One of the things that we like to do, we don't just want to start talking about the comics and say why they're valuable. We want to build in to sort of give that provenance of how you get to 1970 and sort of what's happening contextually. Why don't you give us a little bit of flavor? What would some of the history be that takes us into why Conan launches with Marvel? Why don't you hit a couple of the big moments?
Sure. I think that the biggest of the big moments in fantasy literature in general was the revival of Conan in the 1960s with the Lancer paperback books. And I think that I'd say Dungeons and Dragons, so many other franchises that are fantasy based. If you could list it going on all the way to today with R.R. Martin and Game of Thrones and everything, is that moment of revitalizing the Conan stories that were originally published in the early 1930s. They came out a couple times through the 40s and 50s, but not to as big a fanfare. But when Frank Frazetta came along, we're many years after Wyeth doing fantasy art in the turn of the century, and and other artists at the time. Like there really wasn't fantasy art from say the turn of the century to the 70s. Post-war or around World War I, World War II, people lost a lot of desire for the uplifting fantasy story or even the escapism of fantasy. So when you come along in the 60s, you've got this revival of the fantasy novel, largely driven by a specific artist, because Frank Frazetta comes into that world. A little bit of Roy Crinkle prior to him, but when Frank does Conan the Conqueror, I think it's Conan the Conqueror.
We can look. Give us an overhead here.
Yeah,
Dark Horse put out a nice few titles.
Yeah,
and they reveal some of these
original paintings.
So
that one there, so that painting there, being on the very first,
isn't it Avenger?
Avenger. I think you're right. It isn't Conqueror. That's the other one where he's on the horse. The Avenger.
Here, let's get this up right beside you.
So that painting there is the first time that people see Conan in a whole new light, all thanks to Frank Frazetta.
Now,
it is just like
it's a staggering painting.
It blows the lid off of the entire
let's
fantasy
give
world.
Where it's due. Conan started in the pulps, and Margaret Brundage was a female, obviously her name's Margaret, a female artist who had a Conan. She had a take on Conan. Her art is beautiful. You go back and collect those if you've got a lot of money and you want to get the originals.
And time.
You've got to really look.
Yeah.
But they're beautiful. It's a more Roman-looking Conan, a more refined Conan, almost a literary-looking.
You know what's
Conan.
fun? You know what's a fun fact about that? And that's arguable. Well, obviously it is. This the very, very first visual representation of Conan the character was Margaret Brundage's cover paintings for Weird Tales. That Conan, and this is a fact thanks to a new friend of mine who has a podcast, Imaginary Worlds. I was speaking to him recently, and we were talking about the history of Conan. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he revealed in doing an episode about Margaret Brundage was that she was probably using, it's not proven, but it's probably using her then husband as the male figure to represent Conan. So it's actually interesting to think that there's this man, out there that was originally the reference for a male figure, Conan.
Nothing like Frazetta's kinetic. One of the most, this is a Conan, and this is the Conan. These two are two of the most visually arresting depictions for me of Conan.
I mean, obviously I could literally just go on about
we could do it all day.
Frazetta all day. But the point is what you just said, the kinetic word is very important because Frank comes in with this art that he's, legend has it, and probably it's kind of born true by looking at what he's doing. He's not using reference. So it feels like a snapshot in time because it's truly pulled out of his imagination. So he had that amazing ability to contain an enormous amount of energy within a still image. And it felt like you were either in the middle of an incredible explosion of energy and action or at the absolute precipice of it happening.
And he was sacrificing some of the refinement of reality. He was more interested in, some people describe the character as muscular, but his painting is muscular.
That's right.
And by the way, you might say, this is a comic podcast. Why are you going back to this? We'll do a whole episode on Frazetta another time. But what we want to do is we want to say, Robert E. Howard was writing a very rich, very detailed, yes, it's of its time. So there's sexism, there's racism that's implicit in it. He is at the same time as Lovecraft, and he's embedding in some of what would be, magic and the darker fantasy into these stories that were really rich and detailed and very much time and placey feeling with this interesting character. And Frazetta, I think the reason why you focus on the artist with Conan, and it's not fair to great writers, but you often focus on the artist, is because Frazetta came out and he embodied this character in a way that caught so many 60s kids. Yeah. Now, fantasy had taken a turn with Hobbit. Hobbit came out and became some of, there's, at the time, there's a certain type of kid where we know them as boomers, but they were looking for something interesting, and The Hobbit caught a lot of those kids. And it happens to catch a lot of young people at that time. And here's this Frazetta stuff in these Lancer covers, and they do the same work. Yes, Roy Crinkle, you have a lot of really talented artists. And obviously, by this point, Jack Kirby had done staggering work, beautiful panels, and Wally Wood probably by then, and Bill Everett. You have a lot of really good artists, but Frazetta's paintings were just on another level. And it did something to Conan that sort of, there's a perfect fusion of the work. Remember, Robert E. Howard, what did he write in total?
Roughly speaking, I think there's 18
stories.
Published Conan stories, roughly. I might be getting that roughly wrong.
It's in and around.
It's in and around. And also, he was doing that from 1931 to 33, I think. And also, he kills himself at age 30. So Conan's one of many characters he did, one of hundreds of different things he did in that time that he was from, like, say, in his late teens to the age of 30, which is absolutely staggering when you think about it.
So when the pastiche books come out, we won't get into that now, but there are follow-up books by other writers, Lynn Carter and so on. And these books, they're more mannered. They're not the same feel. So with the art becoming so critical, it reinfuses material that people have read multiple times and somehow captures the imagination of this generation of young people. And so you have a guy named Roy Thomas. They called him Roy the Boy Thomas. He was very young and he was working under Stan Lee at Marvel. And we were lucky enough to interview Roy down south. And Roy gave us the impression that there was kind of a soft spot in comics with heroes then, right? Like they were looking for something new. They were looking for something fresh. And he, I think, maybe wouldn't claim to be the energy behind it. How would you word it, Isaac?
Actually, I think he was right place, right time.
Probably.
And I think that if I'm not mistaken, Marvel was paying attention to the characters that the public was suggesting, hey, we'd like to see in comics. And it was a risk for Marvel because, of course, Conan doesn't take place in a universe that that logically could coexist with the rest of the Marvel universe
until 2019,
right? Because of course you can play with the canon a little bit, but when you think about it, it's difficult to do that. So what was going on there is they were actually going for Thongor, which was Lynn Carter's character, which was obviously very Conan inspired. But there was an issue with the license holder, or I think the lawyers or something. So it was a stall. Eventually they eventually did it, but there was a stall there, and Roy didn't think that he could afford Conan. So he went to their I guess the representative that was the agent for the rights of Conan, the estate of Conan, and he offered the offer was $150. I think it was an issue, right? $150,
something like that.
And he felt embarrassed, so he said $200 without any permission of anybody above him. So he said, we'll go $200. And he thought to himself, if it takes off, I'll cut a couple pages and save some money on the book, and then we'll make it up in there. But ended up obviously almost died. It did get canceled at one point.
It was a bit of a risk too.
Yeah, it was a huge risk for them. But I think it was because the people were saying, hey, we want to see Conan, we want to see John Carter, we want to see, I think some of Lord of the Rings was requested in there.
I don't think yet though.
No, that was something.
You're sorry, the request.
People were asking for, we want to see this.
Right.
And Conan was on that list because largely they do. And I think it's interesting. Now, Rand, you probably know the answer to this. The year that Dungeons & Dragons comes out, that's...
Well, 76 is when it becomes popular.
So you think about that time between the 60s when the Lancer books and those Conan, that like Frank revolutionizing fantasy art, 70 is when this comes out. Yes. So they're really catching the zeitgeist at that moment. Because
I think from a literature perspective, right?
But also because it's inherently also fantasy art, because of the comic is an art form, a visual art form. So that, like, Dungeons & Dragons doesn't even catch up with that until late, which is then the new established, look for fantasy artwork.
But the point that I'm getting at is it's like, can a comic jump into a space where pulp fiction had been, where books had been? And the answer turns out to be yes. And Roy Thomas, he was... it's easy to say that he was a fan of the originals and he was skilled at catching it. Can we get the overhead here? And let's look at this first title.
Yeah, and it's very important to note here as we start looking at these titles is that at the time, I don't recall. I know it's part of the story, and off the top of my head, I'm not exactly sure if it was a scenario where he couldn't or wasn't going to adapt the original work, because there was only, like I say, about 18 short stories, one novella in there.
Yeah.
So originally, these were original stories in the first few issues.
It's hard to see with the title here, but what we've got in this first page is the introduction of Barry Windsor Smith as the artist.
Yeah.
And Barry was being inked by a guy named Dan Adkins. I don't know much about Dan Adkins. I don't think he was a marquee. Artist apologies to Dan Adkins fans. But this cover tells you everything that you need to know.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It's a jump off the page cover. So it's influenced by Kirby. And I think that Barry Windsor Smith, at the time, Barry Smith, was known to be good at that Kirby feel. He had done some X-Men covers and some other work in England. He's from England. Yeah. And this cover has a Kirby feel with the foreshortened sword. And you've just got this very kinetic opening.
And he was actually like, right place, right time. It was actually he wasn't their first choice. Their first choice was to do John Buscemi right out of the gate. But they couldn't afford John. With the risk they were taking in the book, they thought he would be too expensive. But John already wanted to do it. He really wanted. He had already been given the novels. He's like, yes, this is what I want to do. But the story of of Barry getting in there was actually kind of funny because he just shoehorned himself into this young kid. I'm just take a risk with him and give him this Conan book, which is also a risk, and just threw him right in the deep end right there with that title.
What you see in Barry's work originally, and this is not so much our opinion as we read this and we sort of uncovered a little. We didn't get a chance to interview Barry, by the way. His work was kinetic and his work was Kirby influenced, but he didn't necessarily have some of the body forms. Bless you.
Sorry.
He didn't have some of the anatomy that he needed.
Yeah.
And he was good
young,
at detail. He was
young
very
and fresh
young.
and raw. Yeah.
And he was grasping for some things that I think Roy was fairly saying, there were some concerns. And so if you get these first few titles, and we've got a few of them here to look at, here's 2, and 2 has a beautiful cover. And what you get a sense of is that Barry, there's 5. We do have 3 and 4 here.
Yeah, but 4 is very important.
4 is important, and we'll pull that out.
Yeah.
But let's take a think here in Covrprice. Is Conan Won graspable? Is it something that you can buy? The answer is yes.
Yes.
But
I kind of lucked out with that one that is sitting over there. I don't know. I wouldn't say it's
yeah. You and I each got one.
Well, here, bring up my screen here, Nick. You can have a good idea. There we go. So there's number 1, October 1970. So I mean, yes, that's a big scary number for like a really, really nice one, but a typical sale at roughly $205 it's attainable for a first of a very important 1970 comic, which is actually kind of awesome. I think I got mine. What would you say that one? I know that you always say that you're not a great.
I'm a terrible grader.
But
I would say this: that yours would be worth probably a couple hundred anyway.
I bought it for $100. Yeah. It was something you could get in on something like that for and say, there, look, I've got a copy of Conan Won.
Mine that I had is in worse shape, and I got it for $85.
Oh, nice.
And if you look at them together, yours has nicer edges. But what you realize is this is one of those titles that you have to have.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if you know that this is a franchise that's underappreciated. Now, in 81, that Conan movie, it came out in 82, I guess. That Conan movie with Arnold is sort of what everybody knows. And then later they've played around with it. Something big will happen with Conan. We know that to be true.
Well, I mean, it's important to know, and we haven't said this, we said a version of this, but it's important to go back to the fact that Howard invents a new genre with this character. He invents the genre of sword and sorcery. Without Howard, I mean, even it's arguable to even suggest that, not to say that The Hobbit wouldn't have happened, but you can look at what Tolkien was doing. He was looking to Howard as well. I think it's proven that he was reading that, and there was that world building thing that they were doing. Now, he would have done it anyway. They were working in at roughly the same time, but Conan came out a little bit before. But the point is that without Conan, you wouldn't see a lot of the modern sword and sorcery fantasy like Game of Thrones, because that is, this is the granddaddy of it all. And it actually, I think basically that at the time in the 70s, this is a very, very popular cover. There's a whole decade of this book being out before the Arnold movie comes out. So even though everybody remembers the Arnold movie, it's because that's the big flashy thing that happens at the end of that decade. This comic really was, I think, that big pop culture grab that brought Conan into the mainstream before the movie ever did.
So if you see that Conan Won for a few $100, you should buy it. If something happens in the franchise, now Marvel rebooted it recently, and it did well. Of course, COVID has changed a lot of things in comics, but we know that something will happen with this franchise. All the studios are looking for a way to have their thing. What's their IP going to be? We know what happened with Game of Thrones. We saw what happened with The Witcher. It's only a matter of time until someone jumps on Conan and can blow fire into it, and all of these titles are going to explode. So we're going to speed up a little bit now. We've given you enough background. What we want to do is hit some of the ones that are the focus titles, the titles that we would suggest you should collect, that Covrprice would suggest you collect, and then a few that are very, very cheap that if you're a collector, you should probably have based on either the artist or something else. Now, 4 is a great one to buy. This is a very beautiful 4. And of course, this one, as you can see, is signed to Isaac from Roy Thomas and Sal Buscemi.
Nice.
And the reason why 4 is Sal Buscemi, is John Buscemi's brother, is signed by him, is he inked it.
Yep.
So Sal, when we interviewed him, a lovely, sweet, sweet man. And he made an interesting point that when you have a really skilled penciler, some inkers thump that penciler. Now, I'm going to move this up. You can see that Barry's work is very refined and very liney. And even on this cover, you can see work down here in the corner. Barry does very detailed gems. He's not cutting any corners. And famously, he would sit and do loops in chainmail or coins in a pile or whatever. And there's an Easter egg we heard about where, what's the exact line he writes in the coins?
It's something to the effect of, I can't believe I'm doing all these coins.
Doing all these coins.
Yeah.
But when you have an inker like Sal would say his brother John Buscemi, one of the great artists in Marvel history, he would want to attack an embellisher or an inker that would stomp him. Yeah. But Sal was, a brother who respected his brother's work, and he would be a very light touch as an inker. And when you see Sal's work with Barry's lines here, very, very light touch. Yeah. So 4 is a celebration of that light touch. Barry inked himself up to 4. Sal comes in and inks with Barry here. Probably the Marvel method. We have to hurry. I would say you should grab 4. And Isaac, do you know what 4 is going for right now?
I've got it up here on the screen. A typical sale is $30, and a graded 9.4 is $153. I think the most important thing to note, though, which we have not said, is the fact that, one of the reasons that number 4 is very important is because that is the first time they adapted an R.E. Howard story directly.
And that's the other thing I was going to say. We're always talking about the artist. Here's where we talk about the writer.
That's right.
This is a beloved story. You'd say the story. You love this.
It's the Tower of the Elephant is one of the I say the pinnacle stories of R.E. Howard, where people would often argue that Howard wrote Conan's life story out of order. It's out of sequence. It's almost like it's often described as like if Conan was sitting at a bar somewhere as an old man post being king maybe and telling his life story, he would tell it out of order. You would sort of remember, and this happened, and this happened. So the very, very first Conan story, he's a king, he's an old man, and then we see other stories. By the time that they do that Howard does Tower of the Elephant, this is where Howard really starts cooking with gas, and this is the first story that Roy Thomas adapted directly from Howard's material in issue 4, which again, beloved Conan story, great place for him to adapt it at this stage in the comic franchise, because with the comics, Roy's writing it as a life in a linear direction.
And
so
that's
he's going
really interesting.
Yeah, he's taking it and going, let's go in order. So Tower of the Elephant is a story that is told in a younger stage of Conan's career.
And
just
you're saying,
becoming a thief.
Sorry, you're saying it's Conan as a thief, and that's exciting.
That's right.
You're saying you can grab this for $30 raw.
Yeah, I would say somewhere around 20. I probably got it for less. It says here a typical sale is $28, $25. I probably got it for less than that at the time that I picked that up. But we were lucky enough to be interviewing both Roy Thomas and the inkers, so we grabbed some nice signatures on that one, which is an important get.
And I got a nice one, and I did pay $30 for it, $28 actually.
Am I remembering correctly? Go to the last page on 4. Maybe I'm incorrectly remembering. There is a point at which Barry's Conan loses the horns.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Is it that book? No, he's
later.
watching the tower collapse at the end of it. It's a few books later. But for a moment, I know this is jumping all over the place, but I just remembered going back to that whole Sal inking John and other inkers inking John. It's important to note, though, that even if John was angry with heavy inkers, I think a lot of fans of John's work would point out Alfredo Alcala as being an incredible inker.
I was going to point him out when we got to Savage.
Of course, yes. But John, I only bring it up now because John didn't like him. Didn't like it, so I don't think that he liked the way that
right.
Alfredo was inking him. But it's interesting. Yes, we will bring that up again when we go there.
As a penciler, you love your layouts and your pencils,
right.
And the inker has a lot of power. Especially in the Marvel method, and that could be super frustrating. The next one I'll isolate that to me is another cheap grab is 7. And again, it's Barry Smith, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that Sal is inking, with the guy that inked the first one, Dan Adkins. And this is another story, God in the Bowl. But what's really exciting about this one is the snakes. This is the one that introduces Set. And if you're a Conan fan, you have to have Set. And this is Set's first appearance. Everybody knows Conan's snake thing. It's one of the great scenes in the movie, which is what a lot of people know. But I will say this. I think that if you look at what's going to happen with Conan down the road, Tower of the Elephant, God of the Bowl, these are going to be incorporated into something because they're such beloved stories. So 4 and 7 are great buys.
And it's also 7 was the point at which that they were thinking that this wasn't going to work, and they canceled the book. Altogether, and I can't remember how Roy convinced them to keep going. And I've just pulled it up here in Covrprice, issue number 7, July 1971. Raw comic, typical sale $14. It's pretty attainable. Graded 9.0 is 71.33. So it's an attainable piece. But again, there's reasons why some of these might be more of a key issue, even if it's not outwardly obvious.
It's got a sexy girl cover. It's got also something interesting. I don't remember the exact number, but Roy talked about Barry having to address his anatomy issues.
Yeah.
And if this is around 7 is when you see a difference.
7, 8, 9.
And you see the foot and the leg.
Yeah.
It's really, I'm trying to show it. The foot is really nicely done. And you just see he's getting a handle on the anatomy, which will come into play a little later when we talk about Neil Adams, of course. But after 7, it's 14. And here's where I go like this. Look, Isaac, where's 14?
We can't find it.
So I need to buy 14. And 14 is
Well, we can bring up my screen so we can actually look at it.
Yeah, let's take 14. A look at it. It's a critical buy. So it is super frustrating. Yeah. Michael Moorcock, the writer who created Elric of Melnibone or Melnibone.
There's the cover.
This is a really critical it not only has Elric, but it has a character called Kulan Gath in cameo. And Kulan Gath is another bad guy, like Conan has repeated bad guys. And this one also rumored to be important down the road. That this is oh boy, I just did that. This is one of the characters that could come up. When you're making a series or a movie, you need your Tulsa Doom in the 81, 82 Conan. So some people speculate that Kulan Gath could be one of these characters that comes in as an antagonist for Conan. But also you have the excitement of Elric. And Elric is another great fantasy character from the British writer Michael Moorcock. And Moorcock was involved in plotting. And so that means 14 is critical. And then 15 is critical.
Yeah, he's in there as well.
And 15 is the actual appearance of Kulan Gath. And so 15 is awesome. And again, we're back in with Sal Buscemi and Barry Smith inking. And if you did pick this one up, and I'll just put it up tight, you'll see, again, Barry's getting a little more, there's a little more anatomy. Now listen, remember, Barry Windsor Smith is a beloved artist. I love his work. I love his delineation. I love his line. It's very fine and very clean and of its time. So I'm in no position to say that he doesn't have good anatomy. This is sort of the knock that we heard other people talking about.
Oh man, when he gets into in the Savage books, when he does Red Nails.
Incredible. Incredible.
That's incredible.
You can see his work changing over time.
Oh, very quickly. And with those first like 20-ish issues, I can't tell exactly when he jumps off. It's around 22.
Who, Barry?
Yeah.
Barry doesn't do 17, 18, and 22, which is the reprint. And then at 25, that's when Buscemi comes in. John Buscemi comes in.
Yeah.
So Barry quits at 24.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to go and buy 14 and 15, which you should, I've checked on eBay. I've seen really decent ones for about $75 as a pair.
Yeah.
I think according to our cover price, you should be paying about $50 for both.
Roughly speaking, yeah.
And you would often see them buying together like that.
Yeah. I mean, the number 14 there, I think I saw, if I go back one, I think I saw its record price at like 200 and something.
These are slabbed, right? You put a slab on these, they're beautiful to show.
Oh, sorry. Pardon me.
Yeah.
Record 454, graded
Slabbed.
9.6, May 19th, 2020. So actually that's really recent. So yeah, that one's going up.
Yeah.
You can see that one creeping up. Is there something going on with Elric right now?
There's not, but it's one of those things that you think somebody would buy it and bring it back. Like, hey, right. Netflix, why don't you snap up Elric? Yeah. I'm going to grab the ones we talked about, 17, 18, and 22 together. I've never been a huge fan of these three, which is unfortunate. So Barry wasn't on these, and you could speculate all the reasons why. It probably has to do with scheduling and hitting targets.
Was he? Now I'm speculating here, but was he working on the Savage one, or did they start Savage by this point?
Savage would be in Savage by now.
So maybe that's what was going on.
Savage was 71, I believe, was it not? So this is Frank Brunner, I believe, Gil Kane and Frank Brunner. By the way, Gil Kane, classic artist. Everybody knows Gil Kane's work, beautiful work. Frank Brunner has done all kinds of stuff over the years, covers, both gone, I'm sure. And if you look inside, it's just not quite the same, but it is very much of its time, very standard. There's Barry Smith. In 22, you'll say, what's that again? 22, they actually have an apology in the first page, and they say, we're reprinting the first issue. So what's the story here? Yeah, you should buy 17, 18, and 22, even if the art isn't quite as good. They're very cheap to pick up. Isaac can check those. But 17, 18, that's Gil Kane, Frank Brunner. And 22 is a reprint of one. So it's kind of strange. It's kind of fun. Remember, comics is a business. Stan Lee was probably demanding, you're hitting targets. Roy Thomas is, at the time, probably doing way more work than he should be doing. And he's trying to hit these targets. They didn't get it with 22. I would buy these. You can get these often under $10. I know you bought these under 10.
Oh, some of those I bought for a couple bucks. Yeah. No, sorry, I just jumped over to Savage Sword just to look at the dates. Yeah, number one starts 1974 of the Savage Sword.
74. Sorry. Yeah, it's but Savage Tales was
Savage
71.
Tales might be earlier than that. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Savage Tales is May 71.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in a minute because we're going to talk about what we don't have right now.
Yeah, so, which is one of those, is that one you just brought up on your screen.
Yeah, do you want to jump to my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, Savage Tales here. This is...
Because there's something, it's very important to delineate those two things, is that Savage Sword of Conan was the large format magazine size serialized Conan stories that was running in tandem with the comics, but it started with Savage Tales featuring Conan for, I think, 2 issues. Am I correct?
I'm going to hit this quick. I think it was more than that. Just
maybe
a
few.
We can scroll down and see. Covrprice, here's one thing we love about Covrprice, is as you go down through it, and you've got me on it there, you've got the first 5 Conans, and you see them in a row. But what's exciting about this first one, it is fairly expensive. If you get a raw, they say the average raw price is $181. This is John Buscemi.
Yeah.
Doing the cover.
That's right.
John will become the most beloved and maybe one of the longest running artist title relationships in comic history. Did over 100, I think, of Savage Sword. And that took a while. Sorry, guys. You can see you can pick this up raw, $180. I think it's worth it. If I saw this for $150, I'd snap it up in almost any shape. Love that cover.
Yeah.
The severed head cover. But it's a John Buscemi. It's got to be had. And let's talk a little bit about John. We talked about Barry's known for his line work and the delineation, and also he's known for the crazy horns on the helmet. Yeah. Barry is also known for beautiful sort of
post-Raphaelite idea.
Yeah, that's right. It's light and it's very classic. Yeah. Buscemi is known for his love of texture and the jungle. What is it that Sal said about John and why he didn't want to do Spider-Man?
Well, yeah, he was getting really tired of drawing straight lines and buildings and cars and just, the never-ending cities of all the Marvel superheroes, well, most contemporary superheroes.
New York, in effect.
New York, yeah. Big cities. So to get into something sword and sorcery, and I think that they always use the line that something he could sink his teeth into. I'm not even going to try to do Sal's voice because it was such a great voice.
It is a classic New York voice.
It is, yeah. And he as his quote is, he was really enjoying working.
Really enjoying
working once because he did. He really loved doing that character. I mean, personally, as a dabbling artist, I would find drawing jungles to be incredibly annoying.
Listen, you grab a page of one of the Buscemi.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so here's Savage 1. Yeah. By the way, let's talk about this cover.
Yeah.
First thing we'll notice, it's signed by Boris.
Vallejo.
Are you saying that we met Boris and watched him paint?
Oh, what a great experience that was.
We sat beside Boris Vallejo and Julie Bell as they painted. I mean, these are things that you can't do in normal life.
No, usually you can't knock on Boris and Julie's door and say, "Hey, could we just sit in your studio for a while?" You know what? Yeah. You know what? They're really nice, but I would never encourage somebody to do that.
Do you remember what Boris said? Boris said one of the most incredible lines. He said, "I like when people sit with me when I'm painting to distract me."
He wants to talk.
He wants to talk. He wants to zero out himself.
That's right.
And just get into flow. But Julie does not like that.
No, Julie doesn't want to talk.
Let's take a look at this Boris cover.
I love this Boris. You know what? Boris is...
It's less mannered.
That's right. Boris can very easily fall into the trap of painting too close to his reference. And I mean, everybody knows that his rendering abilities are off the charts, but sometimes it feels a little static, a little wooden. This does have just a touch of that, but it's pretty dynamic and pretty great because at this time, he was very keenly aware of both Buscemi being his art director and Frazetta's influence on fantasy art. So if you go back to my screen over here, Nick, there's a few different Borises you see. Boris number 1. If you jump over to number 5, that's a Boris cover with
that's
just what a great cover because this one is really great because I think, at 1975, we're a precursor to the movie. So again, come back to the screen here. This is that classic scene where Conan is being crucified with the vulture and everything. So this is pre Conan movie or pre Arnold. So what a great moment that is. I mean, that does show up in the books, I think. And then this one's my favorite second favorite of his.
Okay, pull that one up. Pull it up.
Bring it up.
Because I'm going to show them something.
Yeah, because this is very Frazetta influence. You can feel Boris looking to Frazetta here. And again, it feels much more dynamic.
Hit the overhead.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is. I put this in a frame.
Yeah, beautiful.
Signed by Boris. It's a beautiful piece, and it is Frazetta-like, and that's why it's framed here.
Yeah.
This is not original or anything. This is just a Boris. But what's really lovely about it is, it's got what would you call those creatures? Those kind of
they're kind of
Neanderthal, sort of like the famous weird fantasy.
Well, and or Frazetta was like notorious for putting Neanderthal dumb ape men into everything, big cheekbones. But and that's definitely there.
Let's come back to Savage Sword for a minute.
Yep.
So this Savage Sword 1, it's worth. Is it a few hundred normally?
But the record recently was $1,000.
I don't understand that record. It's a 9.8.
9.8.
I don't know if somebody knows something we don't, but I will say there is an Easter egg in this. It would be something that would make me buy it.
What's that?
You're going to love it.
I'm going to love this.
Cut to this camera there for a minute, Nick. Yeah. When you open it up, that's a Mike Zeck frontispiece.
Ooh.
And that's a very early Mike Zeck. That Mike Zeck is best known in my world, for his beautiful Punisher. But Mike Zeck, look at that layering and texturing and line work. Absolutely gorgeous. I don't know the inker. It is the inker. I have to think about who that is. It's written down there, but that is a beautiful Mike Zeck, and it's one of his early pieces. Another nice thing in this Savage Sword, if you fingered through it, it's got some work by other artists. There's some Howard Chaykin in here. We're not going to find it, but maybe we will. There's some Neil Adams in there, right? So this is a must-get. Savage Sword 1 is worth whatever you pay for it, depending on the quality, of course. It's nice to have a Chaykin. There's a Krinkle. Look, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here.
There's speaking of Adams, I think the only covers Adams did
We're gonna pull it out.
were Savage Sword.
We're going to pull it up. I have it right here.
Now,
It is one of the best.
Can I be? Oh, okay, so this is where
Are you going to be a problem?
I'm going to be a problem here. I'm just going to be a little bit of a problem, and I mean, I might get crucified. I got to remember that we're on live internet, and people on the internet might be mean to me.
This isn't live.
Oh, right. Sorry.
We can cut it out if you become evil or something.
I'm not going to become evil. No, I mean, this is the thing, is he did the Savage Tales and then this one, the Savage Sword cover. I think I like this one better than the Savage Tales one.
Okay. Yeah. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, but I'm not, I know he's revolutionary in Batman and he's one of the greats, but there's something about his work in these covers.
Slam it?
Yeah, just a little bit. I just find it just a little not this one as much as the other one. Bring up the other one on the overhead camera. Neil Adams, Savage Tales.
I know why you're saying that.
Right?
This looks rushed.
It looks rushed. And there's a weird tangent going on.
But just wait. You say that.
Yeah. I mean, he's better. That's a better cover.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, way better.
Here's the thing. Let me push this up. Look at that. I think he does the best Conan face. Neil Adams, when I see Conan's face, I see Neil Adams and Frank Frazetta.
Well, okay, so now we're going down this path. Now you can pull out your Neil Adams piece of art, Conan. Boom. So now we can talk about his face.
Here it is.
There you go.
When we interviewed Neil at Canada Fan Expo, I think, or it could have been the March one, the Toronto Comic Con, actually.
Was it?
Yeah. And after we interviewed Neil, he said, look, I let you interview me. Now you got to buy a piece. And then he threatened to do things to me. So he's a big, strong looking man. He looks kind of like that. Or
yeah, he probably did when he was younger.
Maybe I'm exaggerating. That's a beautiful piece. Neil will tell you about his love of anatomy, why he's good at anatomy.
He will explain to you why he would have fought Frazetta over anatomy. That's right. And he got into very, very specific detail about how tall Conan should be.
That's right.
And how Frank messed that up and he would have done it better.
And that's why you have to get Savage Sword 2.
Yeah.
You have to pay for that. And what does this one go for?
Oh, I'm way off that page. Let me just go back real quick because now I was looking at Thothamon and some of these covers, which are really funny.
The Thothamon stuff is also collectible, but let's focus on these.
Yeah, especially because he looks like the toy in that one.
Savage Sword 2, I have it here.
$34.75 is a raw typical sale. Graded 9.8 is $3.25.
If you could find a 9.8 of this, and you can get Neil to sign it at any con, once COVID's over, you can walk up and pay Neil. He'll sign this for you, and you slab something like this at a 9.8. Yeah. This is a really great collectible.
Great story too. Black Colossus. It's a Frank. Yeah, it's a Howard original. And there's also a King Call story in there too. So that's
what I was going to say. And you know what? When we talk about King Call. By the way, look at these textures in here. Buscemi and Alcala.
Oh, Alcala. This is where we get into that.
This is it.
That splash page, go back to that splash page. That's
crazy.
Classic.
That's crazy.
Right there. Like, when it's hard to get that on camera. You'd have to bring up a full scan of that to really appreciate. This is stunning,
and you realize the detail work.
Just bonkers. But this is that example
I know
of
what you're going to say.
A heavy inker,
heavy black,
that's there. Well, it's not just the heavy black. It's he gets into this incredible cross-hatching detail, or well, I don't even think it's cross-hatching. It's just his version of texture is so meticulous. But there again, this is why you almost think. Well, I personally, coming to the art in the books, think of the inker first. because this is what you're seeing is their rendering of the pencil.
Let me jump in and say another Zek.
Another Zek.
Frontispiece.
That's a beautiful one.
Oh, he's so good.
That's great. And I didn't pick up on that at all. That's great.
So you have to have those two. You have to have them. Now, you have no options. Now, listen, I'm going to pull up something that's strange.
What's that?
Let's go back to Conan the Barbarian.
All right.
I'm going to recommend that people also buy 25.
That's a good one, too.
It is good for a different reason. Now, you're going to say, Rand, what about 23 and 24? Yes, 23 and 24.
Rand, there are 275 of these books. You can't buy them all necessarily.
I need 23 and 24 because that's Red Sonja.
That's right.
And Red Sonja is beloved and is worth getting. But you need 24 because it's the last Barry Windsor Smith. They're often sold as a set, and you have to pay for these. I've been looking for these for a while. The problem is, once you buy those, you have to go back to Savage Sword 1, because guess what? That's Red Sonja in chainmail bathing suit.
Right there.
So you need to get 2324 for your first Red Sonja, which is, by the way, a Roy Thomas invention extracted from some of the kind of lesser side characters of Robert E. Howard. But you have to have Savage Sword 1. She's on the cover with the chainmail, which she's known as now, and the whole cleavage and all that, obviously. And you need 23 and 24 to get your Red Sonja and your final Barry Windsor Smith. And then you would go, wait, I just paid, 180 or whatever it was. Maybe it's 120 for 23 and 24 or more, depending on quality. Why am I buying 25? Well, guess who comes in 25?
Now you're into the Buscemi.
John Buscemi. John and Sal.
Yeah, John
and Sal. So for a lot of people who collect Conan, this is how they see Conan. This is how they see the female characters in Conan. This is the expression on his face is very Buscemi. You'll see these 4 or 5 typical Buscemi expressions in here. And people, well, there's kind of one on the cover. You'll see them again and again over the years.
Buscemi's covers are just, they're just classic. Here, pull up my page here, Nick. This is a, if you look at like an overview of I'm on page 5, so I'm into the 100s, and you just see cover after cover after cover, pretty much all Buscemi here, and it is exactly what we imagine and remember. Like even just a thumbnail, just seeing this in a thumbnail right here, those cheekbones, and this is a classic pose here with Conan 115. These are what we remember. I was not born in the 70s, but those who were born in around the 70s and were buying these off the store shelves,
they're classics.
They're classic. Now, while we're on this page, I love this one. I know this is not one we've got in the key issues, but I love this for the fact that it's a Frazetta. It's a what would you call this? It's the same as
homage.
It's an homage to a Frazetta painting, a specific one, but he gender swapped it, where Conan would be the one jumping over, saving the damsel in distress tied to the table. Conan's tied to the table, and I think this is probably Belit. Yeah, Belit jumping up over and saving him.
So we will jump in. Isaac and I had a little discussion about this. He did say we needed to put 100 on the list, Death of Belit. And Belit's a very important character. She was incorporated in 2019. Marvel brought her back in.
Well, there's a reason that the reason it's interesting, I think, beyond that is the fact that Roy took something out of the fact that Belit shows up in Beyond the Black Coast. Beyond the Black Coast? Oh my gosh, I'm getting it right?
Yeah, I believe so.
In Howard's original stories. So there's that one big story, but and that's like Conan's one big love, right? Where he falls in love with his woman and becomes a pirate with her because she's a pirate queen and she's like she's the head of this big ship full of her men, and they go on all these adventures, but you don't see that. He meets her, they set sail, they go off, and then there's like sort of like a paragraph that says, and then they did a whole bunch of stuff, and then here's the last story, and she dies. So Roy said, okay, meets her, then he goes on for many issues. I can't remember exactly how many issues she becomes a main character, and he goes, let's fill that all in. Let's do all these years.
It's a great idea.
There's the ending where she dies, which she eventually dies. And then, of course, that great cover on 100.
And you can get 100 for like $3-4.
Yeah, exactly. And classic, bring that one up. That's a classic Buscemi with Belit. You feel Conan's pain there. That's the one woman he loved. There she was. Love. And there you go, for literally $3 or $4.
Which is incredible.
A 9.6 up to $50. That's a great cover. That's a great
cover.
piece.
Now listen, let's jump into something here. We've hit sort of the big collectibles, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, I just want to jump in. If you're going to go to Bayleet, you got to look at Becky Cloonan's run.
That's right.
Becky Cloonan drew a very romantic Conan, and she was inspired by Bayleet. Becky Cloonan, great artist, and she's a woman, and she grabbed onto Conan, and really, she told us she sexualized him and made him the young man who would love Bayleet. And so that's kind of exciting. It's worth picking up. I'm going to talk about what happens when, and we're going to go quick now. We know we're going too long. Let's talk about, you're going to tell me the values of these, Isaac, and then I'm going to talk about why these are good. This cover is fantastic.
What number are we at? Oh, King
Conan the King.
Oh, yeah.
But it's before it was King Conan.
Yeah.
It was Conan the King. This is Mike Kaluta. And he had a run, a fantastic artist. I'll leave it kind of down like this. This is a fantastic cover, and it's not expensive. You must pick this up.
$3.
Exactly. And it's a Kaluta, and it's beautiful. It's detailed, it's layered, it's gorgeously colored. I should be able to tell you who the colorist is. I don't have that with me right now. I love Kaluta's work. Everybody loves Kaluta's work. But this is something you can get for nothing, and it's definitely worth putting up. And let's do a flip.
Where are we at now? Here?
Oh, look at that. $242. And what's this name down here in the corner? Jim Lee.
Oh, nice. Yeah, okay.
Jim Lee.
Yeah. I know.
This you can get for nothing. You could get this comic in a bin somewhere for $1. In fact, I think you did.
I think I did, yeah. Some, especially when you get into the there you go. And when you get into the later ones, they can be hard to find in the bins. But yeah, I think I did get it for $1. And
this is a $1 comic. I've seen it
9.8 is $57 at the top end.
But Jim Lee, right?
Jim Lee.
You can't get any better. Jim Lee's got 90s. He's locked down the 90s feel.
Yeah.
By the way, there are other people that like Jim Lee at different eras and different titles, and people like Jim Lee right now. He's auctioning off gorgeous pieces. This is a beautiful, beautiful red Sonja. It just feels so Jim Lee. This is a must get. $242. And who did $243? Oh, wait a minute. Who did $241? I screwed it up.
There it is.
Guys, I screwed it up.
I was just there.
Guys.
Isn't that McFarlane?
That's McFarlane's $241.
Yeah, you can see that from a mile away.
That's right.
Nobody can do like ripped fabric like McFarlane does.
Give us the top down again.
Yeah, what a great piece.
Like this, man, come on.
Yeah, $8, $5, top.
Oh, you can get it. You can get in a bin. I know it.
9.8 is $73. That is an amazing.
It's a stunning cover. By the way, I should have had these in order.
Collecting by artists.
Two geniuses of the 90s and of today.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Oh, it's great.
Now we're gonna jump. We're gonna jump to something crazy. We're in the dark horse. Why did I pull this up?
That's a good question.
You don't know why I pulled this up?
No,
Look up Conan the Slayer.
Trying to get there.
Conan the Slayer. I'll make it easy for you, because I'm just going to say this.
Oh, you look at you sneaky.
No,
bum.
I'm just going to say, I just want to pull this out. There's Barry again. I just want to say, just give us a wide there. And then I'm going to pull out something strange.
What number was that one then?
This is Conan the Slayer 1.
Okay.
And it's the San Diego Comic-Con 2016 special.
Oh, I see. Because I'm looking at a different cover.
Yeah. Go to the other. You'll see it there? Maybe you won't see it there.
Known variant covers. It's not there.
See, this is a special one.
Oh, there's a Mark Schultz variant cover. But that's not this one.
Don't even start with me. All I'm going to say, we don't have to go into detail on this.
Why don't we have this?
What's that?
Why don't we have this?
Because it was limited. It was a limited. We can talk about Mark Schultz.
Yeah, cover B, Schultz. I can't believe that we don't have that.
Here's a Mark Schultz.
You can get it for $4. Are you kidding? Mark Schultz is like one of the best illustrators working.
All I want to say is, as we pull out just a random few, and I had a couple more, but I've kind of set, because we got a giant pile now.
Yeah.
Once you get into Conan's, you start looking around at different artists. Like here's a later Barry Smith. This is these are less than dollar comics. Conan versus Rune and Conan the Adventurer. You can get these for, people will pay you to take these. They're worth literally nothing. I think they're in every dollar bin all the time, everywhere, and you can snap them up. So they're a must get. This was Conan the Slayer. This is a hard get. But what I wanted to say is, lots of people touch Conan a little differently. So this one feels like a Tim Truman. It's not Tim Truman. He told us he always breaks Conan's nose.
Yeah.
And you start to get a feel for the way different people do Conan's. I want to show you Creatures on the Loose. This is the coming of King Kull. This is not Conan, but what it is Bernie Wrightson doing Kull.
Which is a Howard character.
Which is a Howard character that is Conan-esque.
And it's a predecessor to Conan. Yeah.
But here you have Bernie Wrightson, and when you look at it, it just looks like Conan. Mm-hmm. And it's that Bernie Wrightson horror vibe, and Kull is more of a horror vibe. All I want to say is once you get into the Conans, you start thinking about how do different people do Conan. And that's why we have to pull out the Fire book. Where's the Fire book, Mark? Here we go. I got it.
Yeah.
Here's the Fire book.
It's only 52 pounds.
So we had a fire here at the station in 2016. And we want to wind this up. We want to talk about, he is the nice one, my nice one. We want to talk about the way different people address Conan over the years. Once you get into this title and you're looking for different things to collect, I know we were super Marvel heavy. This book that Isaac's got up there has one of the finest Conan approaches, and it's Carrie Nord.
Carrie Nord is one of the best, yeah. But
Carrie Nord.
You can't get over the Mark Schultz wraparound cover though.
No, you can show that.
Yeah.
I want to just show that.
Oh, Carrie Nord's
the Carrie Nord stuff. Come in here.
Yeah.
So Carrie's Conan is painted. And it's not heavy. It's not.
Well, actually, there's a reason.
There it is. That's the page.
Yeah, there's a technical reason why, and I'm sure it's been done, but I hadn't experienced that in comics myself. But the fact is that in that book, they're coloring his pencils. It's not inked.
Yeah.
They are printing his pencil, so it's really light.
It's
and
like
then coloring in.
It's like painted.
Oh, it's amazing.
He's got
fantastic. That's not him though.
He's got a young. That one wasn't him?
No, that cover.
Are you sure?
No.
Who did that cover?
I don't know, but it's not him.
That actually looks like a Clunan.
It almost looks like Clunan, yeah. It might be. Look at that. Oh, what a. He was feeling that Frazetta influence. He said that. He said he brought back.
It's totally Frazetta.
Yeah. But I mean, you have to. I mean, basically, well, you don't have to, but it's where to go with it because Frazetta really set the benchmark with a visual Conan that everybody loves.
So we talked about getting Marvel Comics, Conan's over the years. We talked about jumping in. Some of the titles we got are out of reach. Those Dark Horse comics written by Kurt Busiek, and Kurt Busiek, he's a Howard fan. When we talked to him, it was clear he was paying homage. Where does that start? Where does that whole run start? What story is it?
It's Frost Giant's Daughter. Yeah, it's right. Yeah.
That's classic Howard.
Yeah.
And Carrie's touch on it is just beautiful. As I say, looks like it's painted, looks like it's infused with Frazetta. Let's pull those Frazettas out again.
And I think it's actually important to note that because we're in that time now of Marvel's very successful and very good rebirth of the Conan book, that the Dark Horse run. It's sort of like, it's that classic scenario where the first run and the latest run are going to be on people's minds. People might not be thinking about Dark Horse for a while. And I think that we have to remember there's some really amazing artists and writing that went into the Dark Horse run.
Come on, right?
Yeah, reprints of the Conan, the paperback covers. There's Conan the Conqueror on the horse, the Frost Giant's Daughters.
These are unparalleled. And these are really, really good deals. You can get these for next to nothing. Like basically cover price, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, if you can get Frazetta on anything.
So let's just talk about just a couple more things. I just want to hit, last time we talked about Turtles, did we not?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there it is.
There we go.
We talked about the way different artists do
Conan.
So if you're
going to collect, well, many of these things, and we just said the similar thing with the Turtles, is you can collect by artists, which is really cool. And to have Kevin Eastman, co-creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, do a Conan cover.
That's exciting.
That's very exciting.
It's like a jam.
Yeah, it is. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, is that not his first ever Marvel cover? Am I wrong on that?
He might have said
He
that.
might have said something to that effect.
And he did a Wolverine as well, which I did not get, but I need.
Yeah.
This comic, I don't think it's more than $30.
Yeah, exactly. Roughly. I think now to get the black and white one.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, this would be better.
But I also want to say, for Covrprice, the Savage Sword run.
I closed my computer, sorry.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I just want to jump to the new Conans real quick. Alex Ross. You can get a bunch of Alex Ross covers, beautiful Conan covers, and it's cover price or less.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great one right there.
The latest Conans, the stuff that started at 1, like you're seeing artists approach this in a way that pays homage to the old stuff that we just talked about, and you can get it for nothing. I just wanted to show you this. Alex Ross, of course, and Kevin Eastman. Yeah. We're not really talking about the new stuff right now. They're cheap. They must be bought. Mm-hmm. The Dark Horse you can get for almost nothing. You're going to have a hard time with Conan Won, the year 1970. You're going to pay the hundreds for it, but it's worth it. It's all going up.
1970 was a long time ago, Rand.
I remember it well.
It's a good year, but it's getting to the point when, 1970 was a while ago, so getting those books in good condition.
I'm telling you, I'm looking at what's around us right now. It takes me back. It makes me feel like I'm 5 again. Maybe?
No? I wasn't born yet.
You jumped into Conan in a post-movie era.
Yep.
I jumped into Conan in the Marvel era.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of us, Marvel Comics is Conan. To see Marvel come back to Conan, or Conan come back to Marvel more correctly, it was thrilling. And so I got into that series and I enjoyed it, and I really love the art. Esad Ribic is, I assume I'm saying that correctly, Esad Ribic is beautiful work.
Here's my takeaway from when we started with the documentary on Conan, and when we... like you just said, I came into it a post-movie, and I had seen the movie at some point, and people will have their, whatever they kind of came to Conan with, whether they came to Conan in the 70s with the Marvel books, or if you came to Conan with the movie, or the current books is going to bring a lot of new people to the franchise. I think the really cool thing about it is that no matter how you get in, you have, if you didn't come at it from Howard first, you get into it, you know about the character, maybe you just know it through the zeitgeist. The beautiful thing is that you now have the opportunity to read Howard's original unaltered stuff for the first time, which for me was like one of those rare things where there's only so many books or book franchises, literary franchises throughout literary history that you go, man, the first time I read Harry Potter, the first time I read Lord of the Rings, it was so powerful, it was so important. The first time I read Howard's original Conan, wow, what an amazing series of books. And man, it was like you can only get that first time once, right?
Are you telling me that we are going to be doing key issue for books soon?
Soon.
Oh, man. So I think what we're saying basically is go onto your Covrprice, just put in Conan. Don't put in Conan the Barbarian. Just put in Conan.
Conan.
Scroll down.
Conan.
Just can you show Nick? Go to my. There's the Dark Horse stuff. That is a Clunan, I think.
I think you're right. It looks like a Clunan.
There's a cheap Conan series from 95, 96. Look at these. Oh, I have those Ace books. I should have brought those.
42 different regular series, by the way.
Look at them all.
Yeah.
There's tons of amazing stuff. We didn't even talk about those great big oversized, the giant size.
Yeah, the giant massive ones.
Those are pretty exciting too.
They're huge.
Just go to Covrprice, flip down through it, find some that hit the artists that we talked about, and maybe some artists you like that we don't know about. Let us know. Let us know what we should be picking up. Yep. We're looking for 14, 23, 24. And the final one, I believe, is 275.
The last one.
Yeah, the goodbye. And once we have all those down, then there will be more we have to buy. You can get the King Conans for cheap. Yep. It's just a good franchise, Conan. And it's almost like we think something's going to happen soon. We just don't know what, and we don't know where. But I can tell you right now, if I could make a hint, or if I could throw a dart near a dartboard, I would say Conan is coming back. If it came back to Marvel, that means something's happening, and I can't imagine that you want to miss that.
Yeah, man.
Okay, we did it.
Here we are.
I am Randall Lobb.
I am Isaac Elliott Fisher.
This was Key Issue, Covrprice Key Issue, Definitive Podcast, and it was episode 2. Next time when we come back, we're going to do another Marvel series. I don't know if you ever heard of the X-Men?
They're kind of a big deal.
Well, let's find out next time.